I got excited because I did a 1K bet that I put $500 down, and if your team led by 10 at any point in the game, you won the bet. So even though I lost the money line bet, I won the bet. So I got all excited because it was like $400 or whatever, and I was like,
I don't even think
oh
I
my
had
God,
that.
how can I sleep now? I just it's not Greg Ehrenberg. I'm good. All right, Awesemo, here we go. It's your old pal Emac coming to you with one Greg Ehrenberg as we get ready for a full day of baseball. We have a unique 4 o'clock main slate. We have 4 games on the featured evening slate. There's a couple early games, and there's one random game in Toronto floating around that we'll hit on as well. But we do have a hard out today at the top of the next hour because we have MMA Live Before Lock coming on after us. But of course, we will also have MLB Live Before Lock at a special time today to account for those 4 o'clock games that will be going at 3 p.m. So please do give us a like and subscribe on the old YouTube there. That does help us out. Greg, it's been 3 weeks since I've done a baseball show. I hope I haven't forgotten how to do these.
Well, you've done more of them probably than anybody in the industry. And I don't even say that I think that's totally serious. I don't know that there's anybody in our industry that's done more of these shows than you. But yeah, we are a little bit up against it when it comes to the clock. So I was thinking that I think we should just talk about the 7-game slate and the 4-game slate and not the 2-gamer.
That works totally fine. So just to quickly hit that 2-gamer, it is only 2 games. You want to take the Yankees going up against Bo Brisky. That is going to be the clear-cut option. I'm not sure if we have the doubleheader starters yet for Chicago and St. Louis. And then quickly onto that 3 o'clock game, you've got Dylan Bundy going for Minnesota in Toronto. Jose Berrios is going to be saying hello, friends, to his former squad. That is only on the all-day slates. So getting us up to the 4 o'clock games, which are the main slates on FanDuel, DraftKings, and Yahoo today. Greg, turning it over to you. We've got the Arizona Diamondbacks heading into Pittsburgh. We've got Zach Davies on the bump going against Aronzi Contreras, looking like a nice SP2 out there on Yahoo and DraftKings. What do you got for this game for us?
Yeah. So, well, first, let's start by talking about Zach Davies. Have you read the scandalous rumors about Zach Davies? Do you know about the situation with his wife?
I heard somebody mentioning something that he just stopped talking to her or something.
Yeah,
I didn't follow up on that.
According to his wife, they've been married for years. They had a long relationship before that, and just one day he didn't come home, stopped texting her, and has never communicated with her since. He has a whole nother relationship now, like a whole nother life. The thing that then I think is funny is people were talking about on Twitter, like, oh my God, we have to stack the Dodgers against Zach Davies now, as if that isn't something we would be doing otherwise, because Zach Davies, he's never been a great pitcher in terms of his underlying numbers. There have been some years where he's really outperformed his peripheral stats. Like his 2020 year is crazy. He had a 2.73 ERA, a 5.13 expected ERA. This year, 5.84 ERA, 4.28 expected ERA. It's really hard for me to think there's going to be too many spots where I would ever want to roster Zach Davies. I'm actually not sure I've ever done it for DFS purposes because of the lack of strikeout stuff. But when it comes to stacking against him, that's usually a pretty favorable way to go about it. But he's going up against the Pittsburgh Pirates today. And not only do the Pirates have a bad offense, they're actually fairly popular today. We have them projected for about 10% ownership. When you're getting any kind of ownership going to Pittsburgh, I get it. They're cheap. They're going up against a not so great pitcher. It's a spot that I'm probably going to want to avoid.
Yeah, and I looked at Davies actually this morning as I was going through trying to find some streamers in my season-long leagues, and I still couldn't pull the trigger because the Pirates look competent enough that, and we've seen Davies disappear at times. A lot of his success comes on the result of favorable hit sequencing, high strand rate, warning track outs, things of that nature, but he can put up the crooked numbers in a hurry. So not someone I was really interested in, but I am interested in Contreras on the other side there just for some salary relief. I would not really want to play him on FanDuel. And I have been playing on the blue site I've played a week straight over there trying to hone my MME skills in their quarter contest. So that's been a little bit of fun. Plus it gives me a chance to understand the inner workings DraftKings of the scoring, etc. There, I've long played on there, but usually just dabble and build a hand built lineup or two for one of their sub slates. But it's been a lot of fun doing the mass multi entry on both sites.
Yeah, and by the way, talking about the other pitcher in the game now, Roansy Contreras. So I'm kind of surprised that he isn't really expected to pick up any ownership here on DraftKings, because he is fairly cheap as an SP2 option. I don't know how deep he's going to work into the game, so wouldn't really consider him on FanDuel. But Contreras is really good stuff, and he is a very highly rated prospect. He's top 50 prospect according to FanGraphs, and you look at the results he's had so far at the big league level: 2.55 ERA, 3.32 expected ERA, average fastball velocity of 97 miles per hour. It's a good matchup for him against the Arizona Diamondbacks. The one slight sticking point is how deep will he work into the game, because we haven't seen him work super deep into a lot of his starts, but he has gone 5 innings in each of the last 2. He's relatively cheap. He's got a good prospect acumen, so I'm willing to bet on the upside and just the talent.
All right. Upside and talent, 2 things lacking in our next pitching duo. I guess Tristan McKenzie is adequate. Tyler Wells, not so much. Profiles like an okay, major league pitcher, probably a number 4 starter, no strikeouts, relies on a lot of ground balls, has a bit higher of a walk rate than we would like. The true kind of pitch to contact guy. Probably would be better if he was a crafty lefty, but he's a righty and he's not in his crafty phase yet, because I think he's only 25. So it's kind of a what you see is what you get there. That's going to have Josh Naylor and Jose Ramirez popping off most of the models here. Tristan McKenzie on the other side, an embarrassment of riches today for pitching on this particular slate. I don't think we have to force in McKenzie, but I'm not really excited by any of the Baltimore hitters. What is sort of your global take on this game, since we can pick up a little time here?
Yeah, so Tristan McKenzie is weird because he's found more success this year than he's had in any other previous year. And he was one of the top pitching prospects in baseball at one point, but he is completely different this year than he was last year. And this is what I mean by that. He's halved his walk rate. He went from somebody who really had control issues. He walked 11.7% of the hitters he faced last year. This year, it's down to 6.7. The trade-off is that he's striking out way less guys. So he's spending more time in the strike zone. That's leading to less strikeouts, a lot less walks, but also better success. So his strikeout rate is dipped from 27.5% to 23.3%. But the numbers and the underlying numbers are just so much better. He's a 2.65 ERA this year, 3.94 expected ERA. Where you look at last year, he was a guy with an ERA of almost 5. He had an expected ERA in the mid-4s. So pitching to contact a little bit more has benefited Tristan McKenzie. And I don't expect him to be a guy who's going to consistently maintain an ERA in the mid-2s. But this is a pretty favorable matchup against the Baltimore Orioles team that, while I do think it's going to be slightly more hitter-friendly moving forward as the weather gets warmer in Baltimore, I still think this is going to be overall a much more pitcher-friendly park than we've seen in the past because of the change in ballpark dimensions. So once again, Tristan McKenzie is not a massively popular pitching option today. He is expected for about 10% ownership over on DraftKings, single-digit ownership over on FanDuel. I think that because of the matchup, there is a little bit of upside here, and we have seen him have some pretty big starts as of late. So maybe he is starting to find his strikeout stuff again. Last time out, he pitched against the Tigers, struck out 8 hitters in 7 2/3 innings. So I do like the spot for McKenzie, especially with the ownership low.
All right. Real quick question here. And since it's 8 Game, who's been absolutely crushing it, and he's iced up, as Lofty likes to say with the badge. She says, Greg, who's your favorite FanDuel pitcher for the early slate other than Severino? I know you guys don't have time to cover it. It looks like Johan Oviedo is who the ESPN has listed as the starter now for St. Louis, and then Swarmer is who is listed as the Cubs starter. I would probably go with Swarmer. Oviedo, I think he got hurt at the end of last year or got set down. This will be his MLB debut. Even if we look at last year's numbers, incredibly pedestrian at best.
It's Luis Severino.
Here's the different way. Would you just go 100% Severino and just roll the dice that way?
Well, I wouldn't play the slate, but if I had to, then I would just play Severino.
All right. 8 Game, whatever you do will be the correct call. Congratulations on your impending victory today. All right. Anything else from the Guardians and Orioles?
So I don't really have interest in the Orioles offense going up against Tristan McKenzie. I think McKenzie is a much improved pitcher this year. He's looked really good. As for the Cleveland Guardians against Tyler Wells, They warrant a little bit of consideration. They're about appropriately owned, so it's not a team that would be the highest priority or anything like that. But it's a team that I do think warrants somewhere around like 5% exposure. So if you're playing a bunch of lineups, even if you're playing, 10 or 20 lineups, I would have them in one or two of them. Tyler Wells, he has delivered decent results this year, but the strikeout numbers are so low that I'm pretty skeptical. 15.9% K rate for Tyler Wells. It's just hard for a pitcher to find long-term success when they're pitching to that much contact. Like I said, about 15% strikeout rate, only 5.77 Ks per 9 innings. If you're giving up that much contact, especially in the summer months as the weather gets warmer, it's ultimately going to lead to issues. So I'm okay with a little bit of exposure to Cleveland, but it's a low priority stack.
All right, I see chat having a little fun at my expense for my hair. I don't know what's going on. Something's changed. Must have my camera in a different position because it's highlighting just this little wispy patch of gray up here, so it makes me look like a Cupid doll. And then I've got this cowlick thing going on right here. I put so much water on it, I can't get it to go down. I even had a hat on this morning.
Did you shower?
For whatever
today?
Reason, it's sticking up. Yeah, I did. I've been up since the crack of dawn. So I wrote a big article. I did the whole run sheet. I've done all sorts of stuff this morning. My wife just ran a half marathon. She got home 203 from her Bishop events. So she was even up earlier than I was and out the door before I got up off for that race. So yeah, it's busy around the EMAC household these days. We go to bed very early though. If
you hadn't mentioned your hair, I wouldn't have even really noticed, because just the way I have my setup, I don't look at you because I have to look over here to see you. Like when I'm looking into my camera, it's just I have my computer to my left that I use for streaming. I have the one in front of me that I use to build lineups and I use to look at data. And then I have my monitor on the right that I usually use to like stream games and stuff like that. But yeah, if you wouldn't have said it, I wouldn't notice. Now I'm going to be obsessed with it the entire show.
I am. It's like there's not much I can do. It's a mind of its own today. But anyway, it's standing at attention, honoring the fallen soldiers that fell down the drain this morning, as happens every day when you start hitting that 50 milestone here. Back to our game, Seattle Mariners at the Texas Rangers. Just so you guys know, the default position is going to be the roof is almost going to be closed every Rangers game until we get to early September, most likely. If you follow on Twitter Ranger Blake, you can search it and find it real easy. He's the executive president of communications or marketing, I forget which. Usually a couple hours before each game, he'll tweet out the status of the roof and then what color the uniforms are going to be and something else. But that seems to be the best source to follow with the weather. But they intentionally, had the convertible or the retractable roof, but they're just going to run it closed most of the time. So just assume that's the default position, especially for this game, which will be, an earlier afternoon start there. But we've got Marco Gonzalez, the lefty, going against the Rangers. That's going to make the righties pop there. You've got Glenn Otto on the other side, mixed bag. He's had some okay fantasy performances, terrifying expected metrics, but I don't know how to get a good read on him. He's an SP2 at best. In my opinion, there are plenty of other options on this slate. It's okay sprinkling in some Mariners, but there are other pitchers we can target as well. This is just kind of a neutral game for me. Is there anything you would like to call out in particular?
Yeah, both the pitchers are not appealing fantasy options, and there are reasons to consider the offenses. But here's the issue with the Texas Rangers, who are going to be very, very popular today. They're actually projected for 12% ownership, the third most popular offense on the slate. The only offenses picking up more ownership are the Houston Astros and the Cincinnati Reds. And that's just too much ownership for me for the Texas Rangers. And it's not because I think Marco Gonzalez is good. That's certainly not the case. He's a 13.1% K rate, a 5.14 expected ERA. I understand his actual results have been a little bit better than that, but I do not think Marco Gonzalez is a quality pitcher. But I don't think the Rangers have a good offense either. So when it's like bad offense, bad pitcher, and the offense is also super popular, I'm going to want to just avoid this and just hope this isn't a spot where the Rangers go out and put up, like 10 runs. And then I assume Marco Gonzalez isn't going to score any meaningful amount of fantasy points because that's not something he usually does. On the other side, though, I do like stacking the Mariners against Glenn Otto. Like you said, Glenn Otto does not have good underlying numbers. He has an expected ERA of nearly 6 this year, a strikeout rate sub 20%. And at a certain point, this is going to catch up to Glenn Otto. And this kind of reminds me of the inverse of, I don't know if you were watching the show yesterday, but I was talking about Zach Eflin and being like, I understand he's given up a lot of runs, but his underlying metrics were so good that you just knew that it was a fluke. There was no way it was going to continue. And that's kind of the same with Glenn Otto, where he's maintained an ERA in the low fours, but the expected ERA at 5.69, he's a replacement level player at this point in his career. And I mean, he toiled in the minor leagues for a really long time. He's 26 years old. He was never a ranked prospect. And the Mariners have one of the better offenses in all of baseball. So I actually do think Seattle is a fairly high priority stack in this spot. Good offense, good matchup, only projected for 7% ownership. So this is a team that I want to build around.
Yeah, it's how the Mariners are doing it this year, because I'm a lifelong Mariners fan here. I actually went to their very first game ever way back in the day, 1977. I was a wee little lad. Got to go with my dad and a couple of his buddies because one of their friends got sick. Here, you know why they decided to take me? Not because they were benevolent, but because they were selfish. My dad was the one driving. Our family car at that time was a Volkswagen Bug. And they were like, why don't you bring your son? It'll give us more room in this little car. So I got to go to drive to Seattle with them and go to the ball game. That was a lot of fun. They came, picked me up, took me out of school. I had really no idea what was going on. Didn't really know what baseball was because other than Little League, because
But you didn't know what baseball was in 1976?
We didn't have a team, and we had two TV channels, and we didn't have cable. We had rural town. That was it.
Mac, I know you don't want me to make fun of you for being old, but this is very tempting. You're like, oh my god, was the TV color at least then, or was it black and white TV?
We had black and white.
All right.
That's all there was. That's all there was.
There was two channels, black and white TV. The baseball wasn't invented yet.
Didn't watch a lot of TV. And no, Seattle Pilots actually came and went before I was born, I believe. They're actually the Milwaukee Brewers now. But it's interesting to see that Texas retooling their offense with Semien and Garver and Cole Calhoun and Seager, and then they just completely fall off the shelf beyond those guys. But Seattle, Jared Kelenic didn't do much. Rodriguez has been phenomenal. Somehow he's leading, or last I saw, he was leading the league in steals, completely unexpected. I read an interesting article about him saying, yeah, people don't expect me to run. So until they start holding me, he goes, I'm going to keep doing it. He said, I don't expect this to last forever, but it's, if they're going to give it to me, I'm going to take them. So it's just kind of weird to see them putting it all together without Mitch Haniger and with Corey Seager, with Kyle Seager retired. So
yeah, and you bring up how the Rangers retooled their offense, but Semien's been a total nothing this year. He's a 55 WRC plus, a 190, 253, 275 slash line. He's been really bad. And I mean, you kind of look at his career history, and in the offseason, he was considered a really high-end free agent for good reason. He had 131 WRC plus last year, 6.2 wins above replacement, which is the equivalent of like a high-end all-star. But he really only has 2 good years in his entire career. And one of them was last year. It seems like the Rangers bought very high on Marcus Semien. He's over the age of 30 at this point. And you also kind of wonder, somebody who probably was a little bit of an outlier, fluke year, and then he signs this massive 7-year contract at age 31. I think they definitely paid for past production and not future production.
Absolutely. We got some free content today. Over here at Awesemo, we've got the MLB main slate ownership projections are available, as are the UFC pro plays. That's definitely something you want to check out. UFC slate starts at 1:00 today. If you guys want to get access to all of the great Awesemo tools, you can use the promo code. Oh, let's make up a good one. MLB Strategy Show, all caps, all one word. And if you're a new Awesemo user, you get 50% off the 1-month Awesemo package with that promo code. Fantasy Cruncher is a separate add-on, but as we like to say, stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo today. A little more fun here. The radio broadcast was in black and white, potentially. Clayton Eskew says Diego Segui started the game, and then he also pitched the last inning for the Seattle Pilots of the season. I did not realize that. I do know his son. I'm assuming it's his son or his nephew, David Segui, played for the Mariners for several years, first baseman. That I whittled my bats from tree branches, apparently.
No. Trees weren't invented when you was a kid either.
Well, it's kind of funny. I was sitting around with my good buddy back then, Abner Doubleday, and we were trying to think of some interesting stuff to pass the time, and we kind of came up with this game called baseball. So that's how that started.
Yeah, people don't realize that Emac's kind of the real life Forrest Gump. He was there for the first Mariners game. He was there when baseball was invented. He's going to be a president in 2024. He's lived a life. He's the Forrest Gump of our generation.
It definitely is. I because my dad took me to the first game in the Kingdom. My brother and I wanted to take him to the first game when Safeco Field was built, and it was just no way we could get that ticket. So we ended up taking him to the last game in the Kingdom. So sort of the McPhersons and the Segis, right? Sort of a intertwined legacy, I guess. Only they don't know about it.
I wrote a joke in the YouTube chat that I didn't want to say, but I think you'd appreciate it if you read it.
True story, Greg. We'll tell that at our next watch party. In any event, back to baseball, we have the Boston Red Sox in Oakland, afternoon game here. You've got Nick Pivetta on the mound for Boston. He wins the lucky lottery today of going against the Oakland Athletics. That is going to give him a boost. He looks good as an SP2. On the other side, you have Paul Blackburn, sort of a good real life pitcher, not so much for fantasy, but the Boston Red Sox for the second day in a row have barely over a 4 implied run total. That was something I was not expecting to see both last night and today, but it is what it is. Aside from the pitching in this game, are the hitters standing out? I mean, Rafael Devers pops a little bit, but I don't really feel like a Boston stack is warranted in this particular condition in this ballpark.
So I actually like a Boston stack a lot, and it's just because of the low ownership.
Fight me.
Yeah, I'll fight you, Emac. Well, actually, I don't know about. Apparently, with all the running your wife does, maybe your cardio is really good, and that could be problematic for me. But I mean, the reason that I like Boston, they're the number one leverage stack that we have in a top stacks tool today. And it's not that we have them with overwhelming odds to be a top scoring team. It's 6.6%, but they only project for 2.3% ownership. And Paul Blackburn has delivered pretty solid results this year, but he's not been good in the past. So I can't look at anything he's done this year and say like, oh yeah, Blackburn's been bad. No, quite to the contrary. He's a 2.15 ERA, 3.34 expected ERA. He's been very good. It's also only 10 innings though. And over the course of his career, he's generally been a guy with an ERA close to 5. Last year, he had a 5.87 ERA. The year before, he only made one start, but at a 27 ERA. The year before that, 10.64 ERA. The year before that, 7.16. So I don't think, I mean, maybe this is just a breakout for Paul Blackburn. I tend to think that's not the case, though. Zips has him projected for a 4.56 ERA the rest of the year. And the one thing, too, is it's not like he's striking out a ton of guys. It's up a little bit because there was only one way for it to go. He's a guy that had a 14% strikeout rate in the past, but he still has a sub 20% K rate. It's not like the stuff is overwhelming from Paul Blackburn, 91.9 average fastball velocity. So just because the ownership is so low on the Red Sox and they are positively leveraged in the top stacks tool, this is a team that I am going to prioritize in the early slate.
All right, that does make sense. So I'm looking at his career page here on FanGraphs. He's played in 6 different major league seasons. Today, if he goes 4 1/3 innings, he will have his career high for any single major league season for innings pitched. He has 192 total innings, 40 appearances, 37 of them were starts across those 6 seasons. It feels like he's been around forever, but I start looking at some of these numbers and you're absolutely right. Each time he kind of comes up, he doesn't stick around long enough. He's a bit of a disaster when it comes to the walks, but I'm assuming I must have been trying to stack against him a few times and just it never came to fruition. So I had in my mind thought of him more as a kind of a ground ball, number 4, number 5 type starter where you're like, if he's not going to implode, if the ball's not going out of the park when he's walking those guys, cleans things up with double plays, etc. It's not a particularly effective stack. So that's how I had him categorized in my mind.
Yeah,
and still do.
And his minor league numbers weren't even good last year. So the reason he doesn't have extended starts to the big leagues is because he sucks whenever he's at the big leagues, and he just doesn't warrant holding a roster position. Then he goes down to the minor leagues and he gets hit hard as well. So his last couple of years in the minor leagues, last year, 4.97 ERA. Before that, a 4.34 ERA with a 5.01 FIP. So it's not like he's had success in the minor leagues either. What he's doing at the big leagues, it's even better production than he's ever had in the minor leagues. So I think the most likely scenario is that we're going to see regression coming, and I'm willing to take a chance on that with the Boston Red Sox. As for Nick Pivetta as a pitcher, really good option, in my opinion, on both DK and FanDuel because of the matchup against Oakland. Oakland, one of the worst offenses in baseball. Pavetta's provided solid results this year, 22.8% K rate, 4.39 expected ERA. He's modest ownership. So I consider him on FanDuel, and I think he's a good SP2 option on DK as well.
All right. The next game, San Francisco Giants, Miami Marlins, kind of a pick 'em here. We've got two excellent pitchers. Logan Webb may have found some of his strikeouts. He may remember where he forgot them. In 4 of his last 5 starts, he's had at least 6 strikeouts.
So did you mean to skip the White Sox Rays game?
No, I did not mean to.
All right, my bad. I just wanted to, because that's an important one.
I went out of order. So
yeah, I know.
So we'll do this one and then we'll come back to that one because it's just more pitching and that's something we've got plenty of here. But those will be our backup guys. So Pablo Lopez has been taking things up to the next level. We're seeing a nice plateau here with his strikeout potential, etc. I really like both these guys. I think they are pitchers 1 and 2 for me today. I think Dylan Cease and Drew Rasmussen in the next game that I skipped, and Greg pointed out live, not so subtly, are my pitchers 3 and 4. And then we have a couple SP2s that we've already talked about. So again, lots of pitching today. Had a bunch yesterday, not so much on Wednesday or Thursday. So it's kind of like the aces have sort of consolidated around these 2 days. So no real offense that I want to look at here. Logan Webb is probably my top pitcher today, but when you look at popularity, price, matchup, etc., I'm just focusing from the 2 pitcher sides right now for this one. There is a lot of rain. There's a tropical storm that's approaching Miami. Of course, they have a covered roof, but I did read this morning per one Kevin Roth that the game should be fine, but he had a nice point saying if bad weather makes travel hazardous, we could see a postponement, and then they'll just do a doubleheader tomorrow. But take it away, and then you can lead us into the game that I'm ignoring now.
Yeah, and
I don't even want to talk about it anymore.
So it's so of the kind of 2 games that we're covering here at once to an extent, I think we kind of group them all together because I don't like any of the offenses here. Right. Reasonable, right? We don't like any of the offenses. So then we're just really looking at the pitchers and trying to figure out, like, okay, which of these pitchers do we like? And Dylan Cease is going to be the chalk of the slate. He's projected for the most ownership by a pretty wide margin, nearly 50% ownership. And certainly a good option, but I don't want to play him quite as much as the field is looking to play him on either DraftKings or FanDuel. It's not a knock against Dylan Cease. It's just a fairly difficult matchup for him. There's a lot of pitchers to get to on the slate. When I ultimately run lineups, I assume I'm probably going to get to like 30% or something like Cease. He'll be one of my most rostered pitchers, just not as much as the field, because I think the ownership he's garnering, it's crazy. We have him projected for reference on DraftKings with a 27.2% chance to be one of the top 2 scoring pitchers on the slate. But when you compare that to 50% ownership, he's just a little bit overowned. So not that he's a bad option, he's just a little bit too popular. As for Rasmussen,
is it Rasmussen or is it Rasmussen?
I don't know. I call him different things different times, and he's never brought it up with me, so he doesn't seem too upset about it. But I'm a little upset with him because he sucked so much his last time out when I went to him as a contrarian option. Actually, I think that day I ended up having him in my single entry lineup. I came like 15th in some of the high dollar stuff on DK with him scoring negative fantasy points. So even more reason for me to dislike him right now. But the bigger point here that I have is he's expensive on both DraftKings and FanDuel. He is going to be low owned, but there's so many pitching options to get to. And I do get a little concerned with his upside at times because he doesn't work super deep into games. The Rays have been really cautious with him this year, that I'm probably going to end up leaving him out of my player pool. I just don't think there's going to be space for him. What was different about the other slate he was on is there weren't that many good pitching options. So I just thought he kind of served as a good pivot for that reason. Today, there's so many guys we could get to that I've already highlighted. So he's not going to quite make the cut for me. Dylan Cease, I like, but I'm going to be a little bit underweight too. Pablo Lopez, I think he's a good pay-up option to be contrarian. I don't think he's going to end up being nearly as popular as some of the other high-end pitchers just because of how expensive he is. He's projected for 14% ownership on DraftKings. So I think that he's a good pay-up to be contrarian. But Logan Webb at 8,500, I understand that his results this year haven't been as good as last year, but it doesn't mean bad. He just isn't generating quite as many strikeouts, 20% K rate, but still a 3.34 expected ERA. Is a very pitcher-friendly ballpark in Miami. As long as there's nothing issues with the weather, like you said, I think that we should avoid the offenses here, but there's reason to like both the pitchers.
All righty, actually making some good time here. That is good, since we are going to have the MMA Live Before Lock coming on right after us here. Again, that's a 1 o'clock lock for the UFC today. We do have the top fighter tool is free today, as is the main slate ownership projections for baseball. So those are our free items. Today, we, of course, are going to talk a little bit about the sponsor of our show, PrizePicks. We'll do that between the slates here, but if you use the promo code Awesemo, they will match you up to $100 with your first deposit. That will come out of your account first into any of their contests, so that is good. And you also get 30 free days of Awesemo premium content if you sign up with the promo code Awesemo. Our next game here, Houston at Kansas City. Do we have an official starter yet for this one? It was Bubic.
So it's funny. 30 seconds ago, it just got announced that Chris Bubic is starting for the Royals.
Yes, that's what I wanted. So why was it unsure? Because he had to be called up for AAA. Why is he called up from AAA? Because he's not a major league pitcher. He should not be pitching today. It's funny that someone who is at the top 0.1% of their craft in the world, we can call them crappy. That's always the oddity here with professional sports, but he is probably in for a rough go of things. The one little nugget I found when I was writing my article this morning was in his last 103 lefty-lefty matchups in the show, Bubic has allowed a 396 WOBA and a 356 ISO to lefties. Kyle Tucker and Yordan Alvarez destroy fellow lefties. Those guys are your perfect pairing today. One-offs, stacks, however you want to do it. Those guys just jump off the chart. I'm glad that it ended up being Bubic. The only thing we have to worry about, a little bit of precipitation in the area. This is an afternoon start. They can push it back because there's no rain. It looks like after about 6 or 6:30 local time. So if there ends up being storms, they have many ways that they can get this game in. It just may not happen in that 4 o'clock window. This one looks like kind of an offensive adventure for Houston. On the other side, we've got Luis H. Garcia. I think he's the last of the 3 Luis Garcias standing in the major leagues. There was 3 of them at one point just 3 years ago, a pitcher and 2 infielders. I believe they were with Houston, Texas, and the Nationals were the 3 teams those guys were on. The embarrassment of riches here, do you even want to go to Garcia as a pitcher, or is this just focusing on the Astros bats?
More so the Astros bats. I think Luis Garcia is a viable starting pitcher, but is not going to be a priority for me on this slate. As for the Astros, they're going to be one of the more popular offenses today, but I think it's warranted against Bubic, and maybe a little bit of recency bias for me, because I made 2 stands on yesterday's slate that really worked out for me. One was I really like the Astros. They were my most rostered offense yesterday against Brady Singer, and Brady Singer was terrible. And then the other thing too is I played 0% of every player from the Atlanta Braves, and they were massively popular and they did nothing. So those were the 2 stands that really helped me yesterday. And I'm going to go right back to Houston against Bubic today. Like you mentioned, he's not been good from what we've seen of him at the big leagues this year, which is a very small sample size, but 14.7% K rate, 9.65 expected ERA. The Astros, as we know, have one of the most talented offenses in baseball. Yordan Alvarez just a couple days ago signed the biggest contract in the history of the league for a DH, and it's very much warranted. But from top to bottom, we have a loaded Astros lineup, especially when you get guys like Jeremy Pena that's producing so well as a rookie. So I think the Astros, really good spot to target here. Implied run total over 5. Matchup against Bubic, like we mentioned, that's good. It's high ownership, but it's not anything crazy. We have him project for 12.9% ownership with a 12.4% chance to be a top stack. So I don't think that's problematic. Once again, I'm going back to the Astros and very high priority stack.
All right. And hat tip to William Westry. I believe I did say the top fighters tool. It is the UFC Pro Plays that is free today, not the top fighters tool. My apologies. I will refund everybody for the free content.
All of the free money are back. And as usual, any promos we have that are no brainers that don't end up winning, Eric Lindquist will pay you out of his pocket.
It's good. And you know who's really, really good these days and on an absolute heater? Mr. Eric Lindquist. He's just been nailing the prize picks. So I will do my best Team Eric impersonation when we get between these slates here and talk about a few prize picks. All righty, we have, let me get back to the appropriate page, 2 more games here. This one, we're going to focus on some offense. We've got the Washington Nationals in Cincinnati, Great American Ballpark here. You've got Tyler Mahle on the mound there for Cincinnati. He has scuffled a little bit over the last season and a half. He's had his moments. He's definitely a good pitcher. Hopefully he'll work through these things. The Nationals, well, they're a team that maybe he can get a little love. Oh, I see Luis V. Garcia is with the Nationals still, so he's in the projected lineup today. Nice. Look at that. Now I'm going to have to go look and see where the third one ended up. In any event, on the other side, Eric Fede, a pitcher we want no part of. We want to take hitters against him. However, these hitters are the Cincinnati Reds, which is one of the more pedestrian offenses that we've seen in the league. You still have Tommy Pham, who does have a decent career history in righty-righty matchups. You've got the ageless wonder Joey Votto. You've got Tyler Stevenson as to fill out that pesky catcher spot. So I think the Reds are reasonable as a secondary stack or as a 3-man stack. The Nationals, one-offs only for me. Probably Soto and potentially Cruz or Bell, but I really don't see national stacks in this particular matchup. What is your read on this game in the Great American Ballpark, where it's going to be in the mid 80s and each team has a 4.5 or higher implied run total?
Yeah, so the spot for the Reds is clearly beneficial. Eric Fede this year, although it's not like Fetty's that bad. He's certainly not good, but there are worse pitchers in baseball. And Fetty's been kind of middle of the road this year. He has a 20.2% carry, a 4.57 expected ERA. He does have higher actual ERA, but some of it's been the results of bad luck. If Fangraphs wasn't screwing up right now, I could talk about all. Here we go. All right. So yeah, a 4.6 ERA for Eric Fede, but he does have a 13.4% BAB, a 3.14 BABIP. That's going to come down a little bit. So I look at Fede. I don't think he's good, but there are worse pitchers on this slate that we've already talked about. Like Chris Bubich is no good. We talked about Marco Gonzalez, Glenn Otto. So he's not even in the conversation for me for worst starting pitcher on the slate. The Reds are in the conversation for worst offense on the slate, and they are crazy popular. They're the most popular offense by quite a few percentage points here. So, for instance, here's the difference between the Houston Astros and the Cincinnati Reds. We have the Astros projected for 12% ownership compared to 15% ownership for the Reds, but it's kind of the inverse odds being the top stack, 12.5% for the Astros, 10% from the Reds. So I think the Reds are the most over-owned team on the slate just because this isn't a particularly good offense. So I'm going to undercut them, and it's not, I don't even want to go to Eric Fede or anything like that, but I just don't want to stack heavily the worst team in baseball when they're also the most popular team on a slate.
Yeah. And for this one, I mean, just if you look at their lineup, I mean, I'm guessing some of it's driven by Nick Senzel likely leading off at 2,400, Votto at 3,100. If we start looking at some of his career power numbers, I can see how projections are going to like him a little bit. Stevenson at 3,400. But can we trust these guys to all do well in the same game at the same time? Because we haven't really seen that this season, and that's what you're going to need to have against Fede for this to be an effective stack. The popularity here, the failure rate, I think, it is far higher than the popularity is warranting right now for this one. All righty, one more to go. A lot of pitching in this one, in particular Aaron Ashby coming off.
Oh, sorry. We didn't talk about Tyler Mahle and the Nationals offense.
All right. I said Soto, Cruz, Bell, one-offs, not interested in stacking. Tyler Mahle can be feathered in as an SP2. Do you have a different read on that, Mr. Boston Red Sox?
Yeah, I like Tyler Mahle quite a bit for this matchup. Number one, the Nationals are going to be very popular. This is the 4th most rostered offense on the entire slate. And that's one thing that has me gravitating a little bit towards Mahle. The other thing, too, is we've talked about a lot of high-end pitchers we like. We haven't highlighted that many SP2s. And so this is why Mahle more of a DK play than a FanDuel option. But Mahle's only 7,500 on DK. And while he does have a 5.53 ERA this year, this is a lot of bad luck for him because he has a 3.63 expected ERA, a 3.71 FIP. So the underlying numbers look really good. And Was it Eflin yesterday who had the really low strand rate? It was either Eflin or somebody else. I think it was probably Eflin. But that aside, Molly has suffered from the exact same thing. All his numbers look good. He's generating strikeouts. Control is always an issue for him from time to time. But he's a 58.8% strand rate, which is well out of line with the rest of his career. He has a 72.7% strand rate for his career. He's never, or 1 year, he had below 75% when he pitched a full season, but only 1 year that he was even below 75%. That number is going to come up for Tyler Mahle. And once it does, the ERA is going to come down quite a bit too. The matchup against the Nationals is not overly difficult. I know you mentioned they have Juan Soto in the middle of the lineup. You get past him though, and it's just not a lineup that has a lot of dangerous bats. So Tyler Mahle is really good strikeout stuff. I think there's upside here, and we're getting leverage just from the standpoint of the Nationals are so popular.
I can't, that popularity is just not, again, it's not warranted. I mean, you got Yadiel Hernandez, not a young prospect, been around for freaking ever, smoke and mirrors at this point. Maikel Franco, yes, nice power, a lot of strikeouts. He's been on 5 teams now. That's for a reason. The other Luis Garcia, marginal. Victor Robles never put it all together. This is a disaster of a lineup once you get past their top 3. I see Nate Rojas discovered the difference between Awesemo and Awesome Yo in the chat. So
yeah, I didn't realize it wasn't the same person. So every day we come and we do these shows. Mike is the producer, and I've just been assuming he's the world's best DFS player. Mike, you mean to tell me that's not the case? No,
I always think
I don't believe. You know what? I think he's lying. You're the best DFS player.
I think of Yo MTV Raps, like Awesome Yo, and that's like the little graphic of a little cartoon dialogue bubble with somebody saying Yo.
But Mike's just being humble. He's the best DFS player.
All right, he is. Yes, that is true. He is pretty good. He flies under the radar. Mike has moments on quite a few of the sites here. He's got those savvy plays down on some of the less popular sites. That's where you got to go to get the edge, get the little overlay, get a little money. It's the best way to do it. EMAC and Fab Five Freddy. Thank you. That's good with Dr. Dre, not that Dr. Dre, but the other Dr. Dre of Yo MTV Raps fame. We've got
Dr. Dre is also EMAC's urologist. Once you get to a certain age,
just happens. Aaron Ashby, 12 strikeouts in his last start. I believe you and Eric Lindquist were very excited for that start. How are you feeling about him going against San Diego? Yet another lineup that falls apart rather quickly. They've been doing all right without Fernando Tatis Jr., but beyond Manny Machado, Jurickson Profar, really nobody's scary. Luke Voigt, high strikeout rate. They've got 4 or 5 people in their projected lineup that strike out at 27% or higher. This just feels like a nice spot for Ashby as an SP2. There's an embarrassment of riches today. At what point would would Ashby's popularity get high enough that would make you want to go in a different direction, or would it for his reasonable price on DraftKings?
I think Molly's probably the pivot off of him, but I still like getting to Ashby. Ashby's really, really good. And I couldn't believe some of the ownership we saw in his last start, because I thought he was such a good play against a really bad Cubs offense that I was like, I know we haven't projected for modest ownership, but surely everybody's getting that rostering Ashby by the time the slate starts. I don't know if I've ever been more wrong on an ownership expectation, because not only did Ashby's ownership not go up, he ended up being hardly rostered, and the Cubs were one of the most chalky offenses on the slate. So I was totally confused by that, because that was a slate where Eric and I both really liked Ashby a lot. I had bet all of the alternate lines on his strikeout props, and all of those hit easily. Like he was something like 9-1 to have 8+ strikeouts. And he had 8 strikeouts through 4 innings. So, I mean, Ashby's a really high strikeout upside pitcher. He's a really good young prospect. He's really good stuff. The Padres offense is more dangerous against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching. I'm still a little crestfallen what happened to my guy Corbin Burns yesterday, who just did not have it and got hit fairly hard by the Padres. But that aside, I think Ashby has a lot of upside. The ownership is going to be there to some extent, but I don't really care too much. I think if I could only play one cheap pitcher and my life depended on it today, it would be Ashby.
All right. Hi, sex bots.
Oh, they're back.
who Who said the magic word? Apparently it's Aaron Ashby and strikeouts. That's the combination of words that brings them out in force here. How do you feel about Mackenzie Gore? 9,700. Do we need to even bother getting contrarian with so many other good pitching options on the slate?
No, I mean, just the messaging here. Fuck overpriced Tinder. I mean, it's free. So what, like, I mean, it's a tough selling point by the porn bot there. But sorry, what was your question?
Sorry, I hadn't read that. That's ridiculous. Yeah, Twitter is overpriced.
No, it's no Tinder. It said
Tinder. Oh, I don't know about Tinder. Sorry, those are well after my dating years. Thank God. All right, back to our task at hand. So waving off Mackenzie Gore, but probably a stay away from most of the Brew Crew here. Yeah.
So Mackenzie Gore has also been a really, really good young pitcher. 28.3% K rate, 3.34 expected ERA with Seiya Suzuki injured. We've seen Suzuki, who a bummer to me because I bet him to win Rookie of the Year before the season started at like plus 350, I think the number was. I forget the exact odds, but it was somewhere around that mark. He was like a minus 200 favorite to win Rookie of the Year, gets into a little bit of slump, hurts his finger, goes on the injured list, and now Mackenzie Gore is actually the favorite to win the award. When I look at the two pitching options in this game between Ashby and Gore, both of them very talented young pitchers, but I lean a little bit more towards Ashby just because he is pitching at home. He does have a little bit better of a matchup against the Padres. The Brewers are favored in this spot. Both of them are going to be really popular. I think both of them are in consideration, but I do lean towards Ashby, and I don't really want to get to the offenses in this game.
All right, we've got a moment here between slates. We've got a 4-game featured slate. Again, the 4:00 game is the main slate on the sites today, but we've got PrizePicks. They are a daily prop-based contest. We use the promo code Awesemo, and they will match you up to $100 with your first deposit. There's no sharks, no optimizers, no mass multi-entry. It is just you and your projections against the lines they set. You can do up to 5-player lineups that net you up to 10 times your entry fee. You can do cross sport entries. You can do same game entries. The only real rules they have are you can't take more than 2 batters from the same team. It does not let you take batters against an opposing pitcher, and you need to have players from 2 different teams. That's really it. Otherwise, it's a lot of fun. You can build out cards for 2, 3, 4, or 5 questions, and you can select between flex play or the maximum play. And if you go up to a 5-player card, which is what I usually like to do, you get 2x. If you get 4 right, you get 10x if you get all 5 right, but you get 40% back if you get 3 right, which is very helpful because, I've been doing some 3-leg parlays over there on the sports books to take advantage of some of these bet offers that they have. And when you get 2 out of 3 right, you get nothing. At least on PrizePicks, when you get most of the way there, you do have a little bit of a cushion, which is nice. The trade-off is you don't really get that 10x or that 20x number, which is usually what it would be if you get all 5 right. But I'll trade that off just for safety because I like to think we can find enough advantages here to do well. I'm going to drop this other link in chat for PrizePicks so they do a better job of explaining it. I'll just at a high level. This is their NBA Finals Challenge. So what you do here is every couple days they have a new challenge. Like the first day was you just had to make 3 entries that had nothing but NBA players, and then yesterday, today, and tomorrow, all you got to do is place 3 entries that have multiple leagues in the entry. So yesterday they had happy hour. So that was an easy one to tick off the list because you could make bets or your cards as low as $1 and you could easily clear that hurdle. Now you got to get all 10 to get the maximum prize. So there's only 9 remaining. But if you complete 7 of these, you get 50 free dollars. And there's you only have to do, you can skip 2 of them. Sometimes they'll do ones that you don't like. No problem. If you don't like it, sit that one out because you can't get the maximum prize here. But as long as you complete 7 of the remaining 9 challenges, you'll get 50 free dollars on PrizePicks. And these are fun ways to get a little bit of an edge. I did this for the Super Bowl, cleared their contest. Only got 4 out of 5 on my $5,000 parlay card, but I got a free $1,000 off doing this. So just want to point out that there's a lot of upside here. These are fun little games within the games. Is there anything standing out for you today on PrizePicks, or as we look at our Awesemo sister site, Odd Shopper, that helps us look at PrizePicks. You get all of the free player props with the DFS projections sitting right next to them, so you know how many strikeouts somebody's going to get, their chance of a home run, expected ROI, all that fun stuff. Anything standing out for you on PrizePicks today?
Yeah, a guy we just talked about, Aaron Ashby, the over-under for his strikeouts is 5. If you do look at the number on sportsbooks, some of them have it 4.5, some of them have it 5.5, but the ones where it is 4.5, it's pretty heavily juiced towards the over. Like I just compared it to FanDuel while you were talking to kind of look it up for reference point. So his strikeout prop, you could get it at 4.5 on FanDuel, but it's minus 220 on the over. So that 5 number, I think, is fairly low. We have Aaron Ashby projected for 5.9 strikeouts today. I actually do think the fair number is probably 5.5 or maybe even 6 strikeouts for Ashby. So I think that is the one that at first glance looks best to me. Luis Garcia over 4.5 strikeouts. I don't mind that either. But Ashby over 5Ks. Until the strikeout numbers come up, I think we should be hitting those.
All right. And then, so they have all sorts of other offerings. So within just baseball right now, they have strikeouts, first inning runs allowed, first inning hits allowed, pitching outs, total home runs. Total home runs is kind of fun. They'll give you a duo or a trio from a team, and then you get to select them. And if one of them gets a home run, you win that question. So for me today, I really like the Harper, Hoskins, Castellanos, because Bryce Harper is setting up to have a phenomenal matchup today, and he could easily carry those guys. And then you get either of those guys, Hoskins or Castellanos, going against what is kind of a tired out Angels bullpen that had the doubleheader there on Thursday in New York, and they used a couple guys yesterday. So all of them have pitched within the last 48 hours. I like the Phillies, and that'll get us kind of transitioning to our featured slate, the night slate. Again, the main slates today are mostly at 4:00. There will be games at 7:00, but there's just 4 of them, which will be dominated by Coors Field. So we'll start talking about that. But those are fun ones to look at. And then hitter fantasy score is a fun one to look at, because you can get most of the time you can find people at 6 or 6.5, and you get, a couple points for a walk or a couple points for a run. If anybody hits a home run or bases, a RBI double, they're basically going to clear that prop. So those numbers are kind of fun to look at. Again, you can only play two hitters per lineup of the individual players, but I think you can still group a hitter. You could go with Harper, and then also take Harper as part of that trio. They do allow that at this point. I heard Gundacker talking about that yesterday. I assumed the same thing as him. It's like, oh, I didn't think they'd allow that. So they certainly do. It might be an oversight on their part, or maybe they're not worried about it, because it's not really like it's stacking that much. Because again, you can only have 2 hitters. So in any event, that's a lot of fun. But they sometimes overshoot their fantasy scoring for pitchers. Now, today, there's a lot of good pitchers. I don't think I'd really want to target any of their pitching scores, but on a day when they have a lot of times when you find some crappy pitchers, there will be hitters or pitchers that you can go under their fantasy point total. Essentially, they have the same scoring as FanDuel for their pitchers fantasy scoring. Hitting is it's close to FanDuel, but you don't get as much for home runs and other stuff. They've tempered that just a little bit, but it's a lot of fun to check that out. All right, main slate, 7:00 slate time here. We have the Cubbies and Cardinals, game 2 of the doubleheader. Did they officially announce pitchers yet? It's a couple of guys that I'm not familiar with, so it could be a bullpen game. Adrian Palente and Caleb Killian are the 2 I have seen on 2 of the 3 sites I have open right now. Do you have a lean on either one of those? Either way, I think we're going to be looking at the offenses here.
Yeah, I haven't seen. So it's so hard to say, right? Because we don't have official starters named for this game yet. We don't have lineups for this game. And a lot of times we see watered down lineups for the tail end of a back-to-back. So I don't even really know exactly what to say about it, because I don't know who the pitchers are and I don't know who the offenses are really. Like, I know what teams it are. I know who could potentially be on the field. I know we could have Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt out there for the Cardinals against Caleb Killian, but we don't know that for sure. So I do feel like we just don't have enough information right now. I will say, based on what we do know right now, the Cardinals are not projected for all that much ownership, and they have decent top stack odds. So at least according to our data right now, it looks like a team to get behind. But I unfortunately just feel like we don't have enough information to really talk about this as of now.
All right. So it does look so this news blurb came out right before we went on there. So the Cubs did purchase the contract from AAA Iowa, from the Iowa Cubs, for Caleb Killian. So what that means is they're going to call him up. He most likely will start today. Because there's a doubleheader, you do get an extra pitcher. He could be up for the start or go down. With the Cardinals, their pitching staff's kind of a mess at this point. I'd mentioned it might be Johan Oviedo, or they may call up somebody from one of their minor leagues just for a spot start here, because you get the one player roster exemption on doubleheader days. So who knows exactly what they're doing there, but we'll know before lock what's going on with that one. But a little tricky to talk about for this one. But the next game, a lot to talk about here. Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim in Philadelphia taking on the Phillies. Zach Wheeler going to be one of our two standout pitchers here on the late slate. You've got Michael Lorenzen on the bump for the Angels. Now, Lorenzen, not very good against lefties. In his last 153 righty-lefty matchups, meaning going against lefties, he has a 198 ISO. We've got Kyle Schwarber back at the top of the order. In his last 465 plate appearances, 293 ISO. That is absurd. You know what's even more absurd? Bryce Harper against righties. Reigning National League MVP, Bryce Harper, 454 WOBA in a 368 ISO in his last 537 plate appearances. That is why I like Bryce Harper over on PrizePicks, and pretty much anything feels all but assured of a home run. Now it's baseball, right? It's baseball. Anything can happen. He could go 0 for 4 with the golden sombrero. But damn, that looks like a good spot for a home run. What do you see for this game, Craig?
Yeah. So one thing about this is also going to be kind of a similar talking point to what I had yesterday when it comes to the Atlanta Braves is, and this is even on a smaller slate. So the Braves are negatively leveraged on a small slate by such a wide margin. And by the way, the Rockies are as well. So there's negative leverage on the two Coors Field games. As a result, basically every other spot looks good in the top stacks tool. Our data would suggest that what you kind of want to do here is be underweight or avoid Coors Field and then just play other spots. I think it's hard to get 0% of Coors Field on just a 4-game slate, but I do think I want to be overweight to kind of every other spot and underweight to Coors Field. I can't do what I did yesterday and play 0 of the Braves hitters because, once again, it's kind of hard to justify that on a smaller slate. But anyway, as it comes for the Phillies against Michael Lorenzen, compare it this way. We've got the Braves with a 10% chance to be the top scoring team. The Rockies have a 12% chance, but the Rockies are going to be 15% owned. The Phillies down at 9%. So, 1.5x the ownership on the Rockies is compared to the Phillies, but the Phillies have fairly comparable top stack odds. So, yeah, in a spot against Michael Lorenzen, I certainly think they make sense. Lorenzen's kind of weird because he's he does a little bit of everything, but he doesn't do any of it well. Like, he doesn't hit particularly well. His pitching has been better this year. He has a 3.19 ERA and a 3.34 expected ERA. But looking at the overall numbers we've seen from Lorenzen as a starter over his career, they're not that great. And some of the success he has had in the past 2 years, looking at his numbers, a lot of it has come out of the bullpen. So I'm not super high on Lorenzen as a pitcher. The Phillies offense, they went off yesterday, and I think this is a decent spot for them again today.
All right. Do you think it would be fun if we got to see both him and Shohei Ohtani pitch in the same game and play in the field in the same game? Kind of be fun.
Oh, right? That would be good because I don't know if you're aware of this, but Eric Lindquist has declared Michael Lorenzen the best hitting pitcher in baseball history.
Why would he do that?
It was like the 3rd day of the season, and he just kind of had a brain fart.
Wait, I don't know, Babe Ruth,
Shohei Ohtani. He's not even the best one on his own team.
Shohei Ohtani. Oh, good times. Good times, Elendy. Too bad Elendy's probably sleeping in today. It'd be fun if he was in the chat, because then I could make fun of him for this. You know how he always likes to say one ring to find them, one ring to bind them, one ring to rule them all. And he does this whole little Lord of the Rings spiel. He talked in the last start for Strider and never made the connection that Strider is Aragorn's name from Lord of the Rings. His.
Oh, wow. I didn't know. So, I mean,
very sad.
I liked Lord of the Rings. I haven't watched it though in I don't even know how long it was. Whenever, like when they first came out, and then I watched them one other time. So I'm not like that familiar with all the.
You never read the
lore.
books? I probably read that series. Like
I did when I was
black
a kid,
and white TV. You know,
yeah,
you did a lot of.
I did read them when I was a kid, but I was like, I don't
10,
know, probably
12.
7 or 8 at the time. So, like, I don't remember.
You could read those complex words.
Yo, I could read. I could read.
Nice. It's a weighty subject. That's good. I'm impressed. I'm truly impressed. All right, back to baseball here. How do you want to attack Wheeler? Because this is yet another leverage spot. We're kind of being steered towards Wheeler and Walker Buehler. We're being steered towards Colorado. Baseball, a game rooted in nothing but failure. How can we take advantage of this with the Angels against Wheeler?
Yeah, it's hard not to consider Zach Wheeler. He got off to a slow start this year, and I was fairly concerned about him because you remember what happened at the end of last year. He dropped off towards the end of the season. The Phillies ran him into the ground to try to win the Cy Young for him. Actually, we've kind of seen this with 2 Philly teams recently. Zach Wheeler towards the tail end of last season to try to win him the Cy Young. And then Joel Embiid last year towards the tail end of this year, actually, towards the tail end of the regular season to try to win him MVP. And at the end of the year, Zach Wheeler was kind of struggling down the stretch. His velocity was down. He told the media that had the Phillies made the playoffs, his arm was bothering him to the point where he didn't know if he was going to be able to pitch at that point. And then he opened up this year with diminished results, diminished velocity. Also, his fastball is down a little bit. And I felt like, I wonder if they just worked him to the point last year where it's having ill effects to this year. And it looked like at one point, but now everything's back on track. 3.16 ERA, 2.87 expected ERA. His strikeout rate is up to 27.5%. So the recent starts for Zach Wheeler, really, really strong after a slower start to the year. And in some difficult matchups. Last time out against the Mets, 6 innings, 7 strikeouts, 1 run. The start before that in Atlanta against the Braves, 6 2/3 innings, 10 strikeouts, 2 runs. Start before that against the Padres, he went 7 shutout innings with 9 strikeouts. Before that against the Dodgers, he worked into the 6th inning with 7 strikeouts, 3 earned runs. So his strikeout to walk rate has been really impressive over his last handful of starts. I think he's back on track. He's going up against an Angels team that, while it does have a high-end offense, there's a lot of strikeouts to be had in that lineup. And just with the lack of pitching options to really get to tonight, it's hard to not prioritize Wheeler.
Right. The most fearsome bats going against him, the usual Ohtani and Trout. Would you look to anybody else for a little leverage?
I mean, you could, if you're playing 150 lineups, I would make 5-man stacks of the Angels for leverage purposes because Wheeler's the most.
That's a good point. You go full 5 instead of just like a 3-man secondary stack.
Depending how many lineups you're playing. If you're somebody who just plays 3, 5, 10 lineups, no. But once you get to a point where you're going like over 20, here's the reason why I would. Wheeler's projected for about 80% ownership tonight on DraftKings. FanDuel is going to be a little bit different in the story because it's a single pitcher site, but you're getting 80% ownership on Zach Wheeler. And the Angels have a 1.7% projected ownership as a team with 5.2% chance to be a top stack. It's just not that hard to go say like, hey, out of 150 lineups, I'm going to make like 7-8% Angels stacks. And you're just well overweight to the field. And it's not like you're totally relying on them at that point either. Just from a percentage play, that's probably where I'll end up on the Angels.
All right. Well, I do this next read about the Awesemo MVP. I want you to think of any other disastrous Philly sports things in recent memory that we can do to mess with Mike. Because what the viewers don't see is Mike is wearing a Phillies joke t-shirt and a Phillies ball cap right now. So he's a huge.
I would make fun of him more if we didn't have 4 minutes to wait to hand it over to the MMA show.
All right. In the meantime, the Awesemo MVP promo. I'm going to drop the information here into YouTube chat. You can get exclusive Awesemo discounts and first crack at beta testing the new tools and features by joining the Awesemo MVP text program. Sign up by texting MVP22, that is MVP, the number 22, to 1-660-656-4417. Again, you can find that on the Awesemo site. You can find that on our Twitter. I just dropped it into chat. It's all over the place. But once you do, you'll get a little text back, and then they'll text you offers. This also enters you into a drawing for 1 free full year of Awesemo Platinum. So for more information, you can just click the link in the video below us here. That's information you can also find on the Awesemo site. But it's pretty fun. I signed up just to see what it would do, and it gives you access to the different tools, tells you where different stuff is open. You don't have to have an active subscription at Awesemo. You just need a user account, but then you can go in and access some of the new tools when we have them in beta, and we're working on quite a few of those behind the scenes. So that's a pretty good deal. Quickly on this one, pretty much play everybody from both sides of the Coors Field extravaganza.
I mean, I'm going to be underweight to them. It's so much ownership. We have combined.
That's not how touts do this. Lock button, Greg. It's Coors.
Yeah.
Lock button. Almost a 12 implied run total. I don't see how we don't lock everybody in on here.
I literally played.
Now tell them the right way to do it.
I played 0 players from the Atlanta Braves last night. I said I can't do that tonight on a 4-game slate, but these are the 2 teams I'll be the most underweight to from the field today, just because we're projecting them to be combined for about 60% ownership. These teams, if you're playing single entry, I mean, just Coors Field is going to be universally owned. The easiest way to differentiate is going to be by going underweight to the Braves, underweight to the Rockies, and looking elsewhere. 15% ownership as a team expected for the Rockies, 45% to the Atlanta Braves. It is so much ownership. So I have some interest in Spencer Strider as a contrarian pitching option, just because, number one, he's cheap, but also he's capable of generating swing and misses. He throws really hard. Young starting pitcher, well-regarded prospect, could hit 100 miles per hour on his fastball. His average fastball velocity this year is 98.5 miles per hour. So Strider's going to go out there. He has the stuff to generate swing and misses. What's the easiest way to limit the park factors in Coors Field? Guys, strike out. Who cares what the park looks like or how far the ball might fly? So I like Spencer Strider for leverage purposes. The Braves, it's clearly a good spot. If you're playing cash games, just play 5 Braves, but I'll be underweight to them in tournaments just because of ownership concerns.
All right, Aragorn. We're now calling him Aragorn. Final game of the night, the New York Metropolitans going into Los Angeles, taking on the Dodgers in Chavez Ravine. Walker Buehler on the mound. Walker Buehler, a phenomenal pitcher. Was that you that brought up the tidbit where he's been favored in every game he's ever started as a Dodger? I don't know.
I have a feeling that's not accurate, though. I mean, maybe it is.
Someone said they heard that on a Dodgers telecast. So I don't know what all the qualifiers were, but I found that to be kind of interesting. It seemed to me like that might be a bit much, but also not completely unexpected, although I would have figured a couple of the times against, the Giants or the Padres.
He's made 104 starts. There's no way he was a favorite in all 104 of those.
I wonder if it's like in a certain time period or something like that. It seems like pretty high. But what I would like to recommend is the under on his on his 5.5 strikeout prop. Awesemo has him for just 4.8. I think he's an excellent pitcher from a DFS perspective, but we can also take advantage of his desire to go with ground balls and limit contact or limit power. In 3 of his 10 starts, only 3 of them, 3 out of 10, has he had 6 or more strikeouts. The projected Mets lineup has just under a 19% strikeout rate against righties. So while we do want to play him in DFS, I think we want to go under on PrizePicks or on the sports books there. I think picking against David Peterson is key. He looked pretty good in his first 3 starts. Awful in his last 3. Magically, that's about his baseline of what he put up last year. Just a mid-5 ERA, allows a little too much power, not enough other stuff. I think all of the righties look really good from the Dodgers tonight, and Freddie Freeman as well in a lefty matchup. I want to see if I still have my notes here because he had an absurdly high number. So Freddie Freeman going against Peterson. Peterson has allowed a 200 and something ISO to fellow lefties. Freddie Freeman, 356 WOBA and 200 ISO over the last year plus. So another lefty matchup we can look at today. Anything else as we wrap this one up?
Yeah, if you're paying up at pitcher, I do prefer Zach Wheeler to Walker Buehler. Buehler's just been a little bit off this year. The strikeout numbers aren't quite there. The expected ERA up to 3.71. We saw him get hit fairly hard by the Pirates in his last start. That's concerning. But Walker Buehler been good, but not great this year. And as for the New York Mets with David Peterson on the mound, I can't consider Peterson. I don't really want to stack against Buehler either. But then David Peterson on the mound. It's the Dodgers offense. They're always a sensible team to get to, but exactly appropriately on. They have an 11.3% ownership share, 11.3% chance to be a top stack. they're worth getting to, but it's not like I'm going to be playing 20% of Dodgers or anything, just probably around equal to the field. And that wraps up tonight's slate.
All right. With that, we are going to get on out of here. Coming up in about 3 minutes is MMA Live Before Lock with Jason Floyd and Pete the Heat Rogers. And then we are going to get MLB Live Before Lock for that 4 o'clock main slate that will be starting at 3 o'clock. You can follow us for all of the updates at Awesemo_COM on Twitter, or hit this like button and the subscribe button. That will get one, give us a nice little lift in the YouTube algorithm, and 2, then you'll be notified if you so choose for any time we go live here at Awesemo. With that, gamers, good luck.